Welcome to the Education Marketing Leader podcast with Chris Raposo. If you're looking to dive into the latest industry insights, draw inspiration from education success stories, or just want to sharpen your marketing skills, you're in the right place. Here, we bring you a diverse range of voices from experts and leaders in the field, offering you a unique blend of professional development and practical strategies. Whether you want to understand your audience better, stay updated with the latest tech trends in marketing, or expand your professional network, we've got you covered. So while you're driving on your morning commute or winding down after a busy day, let's explore the dynamic world of education marketing together.
Say somebody listened to this episode, he or she, they're convicted to go into 2024 and provide a better web experience. What are some of the immediate steps that they can take?
Of course, I would say the biggest thing you can do is start over. My dream for 2024 is start over. But first thing you can do, truly go find your pages and run them through a readability assessor. So Hemingway app is great. Grammarly does a great job of this. And just get the score and rewrite those pages aiming for a grade 8 or grade 7 to grade 9 reading level. If you're struggling with that rewrite, and a lot of people are because we're not all writers, ChatGPT is very good at simplifying something that's already been written. It's actually exceptionally good. So do that first. Go to all your most complex pages, take the readability score, do a rewrite, whether it's you or you with your AI BFF, and update the content.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Education Marketing Leader. Today I have the pleasure of welcoming Day Kibilds from Ologie. Day, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm so glad you invited me, and I'm extra glad because knowing that you speak German, you said my last name perfectly. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Usually I double check with people before I start the episode on the pronunciation, but I just winged it this time. So I'm glad I
it was perfect. It's Latvian actually, but I find anyone on this side of the Atlantic really struggles with it, myself included. So you did great.
We're starting off the episode good. So
we're winning already.
Day, I found out about you during Hyatt Web. You did a presentation there. My boss, Kat, and I, we were really impressed with the presentation, and we just started to connect with each other, met you in person at AMA Higher Ed Live, and I just wanted to have you on the show because you are a thought leader in the industry, and you have a passion for something we're going to talk about today. But we'll get into that a little bit later. I just want to do a little bit of a introduction about yourself. As I did my research, I noticed that you have a bachelor's degree in international business from the Hochschule at Furtwangen, of all places. And,
I know.
And you have a master's in applied statistics from Penn State, and you've worked in higher ed for the last 10 years. So let's talk about your journey a little bit. Of all places, how did you end up in Germany?
I actually, it's an interesting story. So my grandparents are from 4 different countries. One of them is Germany. So on my dad's side, his mom was German and his dad was Latvian. That's where Kibilds comes from. It is not my married name. I didn't change my name. And then on my mom's side, my grandfather is Italian and my grandmother was Venezuelan. So the German influence has always been a part of my upbringing because of my dad and his mom. When the time came to go to university, and this is what the talk was that you saw, I really struggled with the US university system. I was living in Mexico at the time. I failed to apply correctly, and I basically had no options. So when we were deciding what am I going to do, my dad was like, how about Germany? And so we Googled it. We've tried to find programs that started in English because I didn't speak German at the time. And we found a couple and we sent a bunch of emails, and Hochschule Furtwangen was the first one to answer. So they got me.
Nice.
After that, a lot of things happened. Ended up moving to Penn State with my husband for him to start his PhD program. And that's why I was at Penn State. I studied at Penn State, but I also started my higher ed career there. And I wish I had some kind of moving reason for why higher ed and why I got into this industry in the first place. But really, it was a very practical reason. I'm married to a would-be professor or will-be professor. And if he's going to be a professor for the rest of his life, I need to work at the university too, because we're going to have to move. And I don't want to be a trailing spouse without options. So I started working at Penn State, and that was in 2010, I believe. And the rest is history.
Yeah. Yeah. And now you're at Ologie, so you're doing great work there with the insights coming from higher ed. So you're not just an advisor or a partner coming from the outside in, talking about all these wonderful things that higher ed institutions should do, but you're actually speaking from experience. And we'll talk about some of the barriers the higher ed content may have for international students and non-traditional students, and some of the issues there may be on higher ed websites that keep potential students from applying to prospective universities. So you told us a little bit about not getting into the university system in the United States. That's why you had to pivot to Germany. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more? Because I know you talk about it in your talks during higher ed conference, but some people may have not heard those. So can you talk about that a bit?
So first I'll do a plug. If you haven't heard that story, go to the Cascade user conference, because I will be talking about that. You're so welcome, Chris. You're so welcome.
Thank you.
But what essentially happened, I had always been a very high achieving student from birth. I say that jokingly, but also when I was 3 years old, I started school. And by the time I was 4, I was ready for first grade. I was very academically motivated. And that was basically my personality. It still kind of is, to be honest. So wherever we moved, my family moved many times. I've lived in 6 different countries. No, my dad was not in the military. He was just a serial entrepreneur with big dreams. So we moved around a lot, and every time we moved, I had to start over, but I ended up achieving academically very fast. So there were these big disruptions in my childhood about where I was, what culture I was in, what language I was living in, but still I managed to get really good grades. So by the time I was in high school, we were in Mexico City, and I was in the International Baccalaureate program. And, I'm thinking, I'm a smart kid. I'm going to get into any school I want. But my parents never went to university. They had high school diplomas from Venezuela, from, I'm not going to reveal, I don't know the math, like in the 70s, the 80s, I don't know. They hadn't continued their education. They were not familiar with the university system in the US. And we weren't even living in the US at the time. So I wasn't familiar with the US university system either. So because I was in the International Baccalaureate program, I was in a very prestigious high school in Mexico. So my peers and their parents and their families, they knew what was going on, right? So the information that I got was kind of like third party, like where my friends were applying to university. And you can imagine, right? Prestigious university, prestigious school in Mexico, International Baccalaureate students, everyone's dropping Harvard, MIT, Cornell. Like these are the schools that my peers were applying to. And of course, there's also the schools on TV. So I'm like, of course I'm going to MIT. I'm too good for Harvard. I'm going to MIT, right? So that's literally, I applied to Harvard, I applied to MIT, and I applied to Cornell because my crush at the time, who is now my husband, had also applied to Cornell. So, I spent the most time writing an essay about how I'm this global citizen and I have all these perspectives because I've lived in all these countries and I've had to start over so many times, and it's made me really grow up and realize I know nothing, whatever. So I'm like really proud of this essay. I'm like, how could they reject me with this essay? Like, I'm great for this spot. Like, I'm really going to take advantage of it. Again, I really liked to study and learn and do. So I sent that, and I sent copies of my IB grades and the things that I kind of had in the moment. And of course, I got 3 letters back. Of course, I didn't get into any of these places. And it wasn't until much later in my life that it dawned on me that the reason I didn't get into these places is because I didn't send them all my transcripts. Because now I'm an admissions professional. I've been working in higher ed for many years. The majority of the time that I was in higher ed, or have been in higher ed, was admissions counselor. I'm like, wait a minute. You sent them a TOEFL, you sent them your IB grades, but you didn't send them 9th grade, 10th grade. You didn't send any of the other stuff they asked for. And I'm like, how could I have missed that? Like, how is something that to us in this world seems so obvious, not at all obvious to a 17-year-old girl in Mexico City trying to navigate the system all by herself because she didn't have parents or resources to tell me what I needed to do. So that's when I started really getting critical and picky and obsessive about website content, especially admissions website content. It came from that personal experience of, if I think about me objectively, if I think about a student who has gone through what that student went through and the many places that she was at and still was able to excel academically and otherwise, like this would be the kind of student I want to admit to my institution, but I didn't get in. So I started feeling very critical of how websites present this content because I missed it.
Yeah. And you were like academically inclined, so you weren't like just aloof. You didn't know what to do, right?
Right.
Pretty smart. You
Right.
would have navigated if you would have found it.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and I'm sure you're not the only person that struggles with that admissions process to figure out what exactly needs to be done, where to find it on a higher ed website, how many steps you have to take to actually get to that information is one of the issues that you talked about during one of your talks that I watched. Are there any stats you can share with the broader audience to see, hey, this is actually a real issue for potential students, and that's a hindrance for people to actually get to your school, especially with the dropping numbers of traditional age students with the looming enrollment cliff, right? It's really important to get people through that admissions process efficiently. What are some of the stats out there?
There's a lot of research, a lot more recently on this, and that's very encouraging. But I will say there isn't really research on the people that don't even try, right? So we, as the folks writing content for websites, need to understand that there's a whole population of students or potential students that don't even try, right? So they're not in our funnels. We don't know if they converted or not. We have no idea, right? Because they know, like they see this huge mountain and they're not prepared to even try to tackle it, right? But then of the students that are thinking of college and are kind of in this pipeline, some of my favorite stats are Niche put out the 2023 senior enrollment survey, and they found that 57% of seniors, 57%, don't even apply because of how complicated they perceive the admissions process to be. And it is complicated, right? But we make it even more complicated with how we present the information. Another study by RNL, the 2023 College Planning and Student Emotions Report, they found that 86% of high school seniors report that they're really stressed often. And a lot of that is what's happening in their lives. But when they kind of dug into the reasons, 71% of those 86% say that one of their biggest worries is forgetting to submit something important in their college applications. That's what happened to me. So look at these percentages, like 86, 71, right? 57% don't even apply. These are big numbers. And if we know this process is complicated, and if we know it's causing distress, let's fix it, right? The last stat I'll share is a web study that Ologie did. So my company did 2023 as well. And this was really interesting because there's a segment of this study that focused on language. And that's really what I really obsess about, because language is something that we can change with no technical requirements, right? We don't need a new CMS. We don't need new technology. We don't need a lot of user research to just write simply, right? So when we kind of asked prospective students or high school students about some terms, website terms in the enrollment process, like terms like financial aid, admissions, graduate, and one of like particular finding that I find really interesting is the word undergraduate, because when you ask them, hey, do you know what undergraduate means? About a third of the students say they don't, flat out, I have no idea what this means. And that percentage is like 23% white students don't know what it means, but something upward to like 39% of students that are low income don't know what it means. And when you think about, okay, well, 23%, 39%, there's still, that means that there's still like 60 or 70% of students that do know what it means. Well, in our study, we actually, if they said they knew what it meant, we went a step further and we're like, okay, define it. Tell us what it is. And what they typed in were things like didn't graduate, not enough credits to graduate, right? Like didn't get a bachelor's degree. And I'm like, well, yeah, technically you don't have a bachelor's degree yet, but that's not what it means. And how many of our higher ed websites use the word undergraduate as like a main navigation element? Right? Like it's like I'm supposed to know when I go to this website, oh, I am undergraduate.
Yeah.
But like our study showed they don't even know what it means, right? So there's these stats kind of paint this picture that it's not just me holding a grudge. But a lot of students are being kept out of our institutions because of the content on our websites.
Absolutely. That's why it's good to run these this content that you create through apps like Hemingway to see what the readability level is.
Yes.
If you write it on a 5th grade level, you have a better chance of people understand what you actually mean on there. But let's go back to what you said about students not able to find what they need on a higher ed website. Maybe the content is too complicated, but they can't find it. So what are some of the things that some of the issues that you see, some of the things that higher ed marketers, enrollment professionals could do? Should they create more content maybe to help people find it?
You're baiting me. No, do not create more content. Like that is our first like knee-jerk response. It's, oh, students are confused. Let's make another page to explain it. Let's make a frequently asked questions page to answer the questions. I have thoughts and opinions and feelings about FAQs. You can ask me later. That is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing, because what ends up happening is we're creating more cognitive load, right? So if you're not super familiar with what that means, basically it's the idea of equating a human brain to a computer, and this thought that we as human brains, like we also have limited capacity to process amounts of information. So when there's too much coming in, we stop thinking clearly. It takes longer for us to understand what it's saying. We don't take action. And sometimes like even just completely abandon the task, which is happening to 57% of students, according to Niche. They don't even try, right? So we are good people at heart. That's why we work at higher ed, right? And when we're seeing and we're realizing and we're noticing that folks are being excluded from our universities because of how complicated the process is, we're like, let's simplify it by explaining it more. And so we make more pages and more pages. And so what ends up happening, if you think about it, for especially a student in a minority group or an international student in a minority group, you would have to read the regular pages for everyone, right? You have to read the admissions pages, you have to read your program pages, but then you have to go to more pages, and you have to know that you have to go to more pages that are about your specific requirements, like international study permits, TOEFL or IELTS or any other English language proficiency test, additional transcripts that have to be translated and notarized and mailed a certain way. And then on top of all of that, right, if you're like, we're going to build a pathway because we want to create access for X group, right? I also have to do all of that. So I have to do all the regular process plus the pathway process. And I have to know that I have to do that. So more is actually harmful. More is more cognitive load. What we need to do is less and explain it better. And language is a really easy way to make it simpler. So you were talking about Hemingway app. That's a free website. You just make sure that the things that you're writing are at easy to consume reading level or readability score. And typically that's like 7th grade, 8th grade reading level. But if you go to your website right now, click a couple times to go to like any financial aid page, any, truly, pick one, any at random, put it in the Hemingway app. I guarantee you it's going to be at least a grade 11 reading level. And what most people say and react to there is they should be able to understand grade 11 reading level, right? They're graduating high school. But that is that is true if they were reading academic papers or doing homework, but it isn't true when you're trying to get them to do a task. And as adults, when we are navigating government websites, Amazon, and any shopping that we do online, anything that we want to figure out online, because these big companies know this, everything that we navigate online is easy because they know this, because they want us to take action. So we need to just apply those same principles to our websites.
Yeah, and apply with empathy, right? Once you put it on there, make sure you put yourself
That's right.
in the shoes of that prospective student. We were laughing about the Germany university, and I didn't give the context for people who don't know me. I was born and raised in Germany. I went to high school in Germany, then I moved to the United States. And one of the barriers for me to enrolling in university was the transcripts. I had to get the transcript from Germany, then I had to translate the transcript from German to English, done by a professional company, and then send it to the university and the college. So when I first moved
in a sealed envelope, Chris.
Sealed envelope, exactly. Me moving to the United States at the age of 22, barely speaking a lick of English, barely making it, right? So first of all, I didn't want to pay to get these things translated, let alone drop money on college. So I went to school as a non-traditional student at the age of 30, right? When I was finally mentally ready to go down that path. So that was another one of those things. That's why we were laughing about the Germany thing earlier.
Yeah.
Just wanted to bring that up.
It's extremely complicated. It's complicated in any direction, right? And most people don't realize how complicated something like translating a transcript is. And that's one step in dozens of steps in this admission process.
Yeah. What are some of the common barriers or arguments that you've encountered when trying to convince institutions to improve their websites' accessibility, and how do you address them?
Well, one of them I just alluded to just now, where a lot of people kind of put up this front, like, well, they should be able to read complex language. But there is so much research on that, on readability and the effect that it has on action and comprehension. And even there's the Nielsen Norman Group has a bunch of studies, but one of my favorite findings is that even high literacy users, readers, folks, people, prefer low, like, content that's written in a simple way, because it makes us feel good. Like, if you can read things fast and you're getting it, you're like, you're vibing with the content, instead of, having to sit down with a dictionary and like take it sentence by sentence. We might do that in a professional or academic setting, but we don't want to do that when we just need to figure out a transaction, right? So that's the biggest thing. It's, well, they should be able to. I would say, like, that stance is very anti-equity. So nobody should be saying that anymore, because even if it's a student who, grew up with English as a first language and has parents that went to college, you don't really know their circumstances. You don't know what else they're dealing with in their life. You don't know if they're taking care of their younger siblings or a grandparent, or they have to have a part-time job to help the family make ends meet. They don't have time to sit down and read your website plus the 9 other websites for the 10 schools that they're applying to and figure out sentence by sentence what it is that you're trying to say. No more of that. That is not an appropriate stance. The other thing, there's this perception of, well, if they can't figure out the process, they're not going to succeed here. And again, I challenge that with, is that an equity perspective, or is that like, is that you opening up the doors to your institution, or is that you leaving people out? And And the third thing I'll say is interesting, because I only realized this after being an admission counselor for a few years. There is this immense pride that admission counselors have in really understanding the process, right? Like, we say this to each other. We say this to new admission counselors, like, oh, it's going to take you at least 2 full cycles to get all the nuance of every complication we have in our requirements. Like, we say that with pride. People that have been there for a long time are like, oh yeah, I'm an expert because I know every exception, right? And yet that, we turn around and we say to the 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds, like, figure it out. And you figure it out in the 4 months that you have to figure this out, plus all the other schools that you're looking at, plus graduating from high school, becoming an adult, leaving your life, leaving your family, leaving your friends. It's just, it's, when you think about it this way, you're like, whoa, we really need to be empathy first, equity first, and get away from this kind of pedestal we've put ourselves on, and really think about what we're there to do and who we're there to serve.
Yeah, talking about the pedestal and the high barrier of entry that we want for a higher ed institution, like you mentioned earlier, and I heard you in preparation to this interview, I've listened to a couple of podcast episodes that you were on in the past, and I heard you talk to a gentleman about how, if somebody can't apply, if somebody can't make it through the process to apply to your higher ed institution, they probably not going to succeed at your institution, that kind of mindset. But then you said something that was very interesting to me, that probably half of the people that make it through the application process isn't because they figured it out. It's because one of their parents was able to, or a counselor was going through it with them and helping them figure it out, and people that are first generation students, their parents don't know how to get through this, right? But if you have somebody who's a legacy student, it's going to be a little bit easier for them to get in there. So it's the equity inclusion that you just talked about, that we have to keep in mind there, that just because a kid, 18-year-old, 17-year-old kid made it through the application process, you don't know who helped them with that. So it doesn't mean they're any smarter than the ones that didn't make it in.
And it's, the first generation student is a great example of that. But I would even say students whose parents did go to college. How many years ago was that, right?
Yeah.
20 more. And so who remembers what they, like, exactly the process they followed 20 years ago? Like, they have a lot more context and they can figure it out, but the parents are the ones sitting with your websites in the dictionary and building spreadsheets and trying to make sense of it. And if you go to, there's this really awesome Facebook group called Paying for College 101, I believe. And it's a bunch of parents, like, almost 40,000 parents in there. So it's a really great sampling for us higher ed marketers to, like, see what they're talking about. They don't get it. Like, they're using each other to try to understand financial aid alone. And then there's all the other stuff they need to figure out. So we can do that. Like, we know the process. We can simplify it for everybody. And what's stopping us?
Yeah, exactly. So what's stopping us? Let's talk about that as we bring the episode slowly to a close. What's some of the most significant changes you've seen or you hope to see in educational institutions' approach to web accessibility in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so what I have seen, it's kind of all over the place. I more and more encounter a few pages on if you think about the entire website ecosystem of a university, right? I don't know how many pages there are, at least like hundreds, 100 at least, right? You can find more today than before, a few pages that you're like, oh, this is great. Like, well done. Good job. It's clearly laid out. The language is simple. It's nice to look at, easy to scan. But when you click more, like you dig because you need to find more specifics, then you're back to like an old instance of something that is super hard to read, and like, I don't even care what it looks like, if it looks different or not. It's readability alone that you're like, wait a minute, so you only touch your top level pages. And I get why, because now I work at an agency and we do websites, and sometimes the budget didn't reach for the entire 100 pages, and the project, it takes too long, and everybody's doing their day job and no one has time to rewrite all the pages. I get it. But I've seen some great efforts for some pages that does not translate through the entire user journey. So I haven't seen a holistic approach, and that's the problem, right? Because if your landing pages that catch me from an ad are awesome, but then I'm like serious and then I want to apply to you and I'm trying to do that and I can't, you just wasted your money and you just wasted my time. So I've seen that. What I haven't seen and I would love to see is a focus on less, not more. So we were talking about this before. More adds cognitive load. What I have not seen are universities saying, how do we simplify instead of how do we add on top? How do we not make an FAQ and instead like really clean up the pages where this content should be? How do we, like if we know, for example, there's going to be there are QuestBridge applicants to our institution. How do we build an experience for them that includes all the information they need instead of all these different places where they need to go for information on top of their own pathway? So I haven't seen that focus, that holistic focus by anyone yet that focuses on less, that focuses on a specific student journey. So if you're listening to this and you're out there, please show yourself to me. Send me a LinkedIn message, because people ask me this all the time, like, who's doing it well? And I'm like, I don't know. I haven't found them yet. So if you think it's you, I want to meet you. But we're not doing enough. And the reason is because we're not starting from scratch. So I would like to see a school start from scratch. And that feels overwhelming. But my advice would be pick a segment, pick a student group, pick a focus, and just read like, what would the process look like? What would the content for the process look like for that group if you could start from scratch today? That's what I would want to see.
Very, very great advice. And I really encourage everybody who's doing it well, send Day a message, because she will amplify your institution.
I will use you as my example.
Yeah. Say somebody listened to this episode, he or she, they're convicted to go into 2024 and provide a better web experience. What are some of the immediate steps that they can take to do that?
Yeah. So January 2nd, when you're back in your office, if you're one of those schools that's going to open that day, we are at Ologie. And frankly, I'm going to be excited to start working again after so much family time. But first thing you can do, truly go find your pages and run them through a readability assessor. So Hemingway app is great. That's like, I think it's hemingwayapp.com. Grammarly does a great job of this. And just get the score and rewrite those pages aiming for a grade 8 or grade 7 to grade 9 reading level. If you're struggling with that rewrite, and a lot of people are because we're not all writers, ChatGPT is very good at simplifying something that's already been written. Like, it's actually exceptionally good at that particular thing. So do that first. Like, go to all your most complex pages, take the readability score, do a rewrite, whether it's you or you with your AI BFF, and update the content. That doesn't require any technical knowledge. That doesn't require a lot of investment. It might require approval because I know how universities work, and somebody from admissions is going to be like, well, you can't change this language because then lawsuits will happen. Lawsuits don't really happen that often, but if that's the case, get them to tell you specifically what it is in the language that can't be changed for lawsuit purposes. And one of the things that I've done is, like, I write the simple content, I put it on the site first, and then like at the bottom, I'm like, this is how we have to say it so our lawyers are happy. Yes. And like just dump the shit in there. Truly, like, do that. Your students would thank you for it. So do that first. Then you can start thinking about user research. I think that's really where everything starts. That does take resources, but it doesn't take big technical implementations, right? So can you work with a consultant? Can you work with a freelancer? Is there someone on your team that has a little bit of extra time that can really focus on understanding the journey of a particular segment. So find groups of students that you can talk to, ask them, how did you find information? Did you understand it? Where were you looking? What was a barrier? Where were you getting stuck? What was really confusing? And from there, you're going to get this really holistic picture of what their needs are and when those needs are and what was a sticking point for them. And then you can start changing copy and websites from that, using that data, right? Of course, I would say like the biggest thing you can do is like start over. My dream for 2024 is start over. There's so much technology out there right now that is just incredible that you can use to show personalized dynamic content. I'm pretty sure there's like AI integrated into something now that would generate content for students depending on what they need. So look into that. Look into what's next for us. Like, what's our target goal of really personalizing this experience? But you can make an immediate impact with language. You're going to have to do the research for anything more than that. So start with those two things first, and then implement something bigger.
Very good. Thank you so much for the pragmatic answer. Let's say somebody's taking you up on that, implementing that. They're doing a stellar job. They're way on their way to making it accessible. They want to tell you about it. How can they get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is definitely the best spot to find me right now. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post a lot of useful things there. I think they're useful, I hope. So find me with my name at LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect.
Awesome, Dave. Thank you so much for being part of the show today. I really appreciate your insights. I hope you have a happy new year.
Thank you so much. You too.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning into the show today. If you enjoyed it, don't keep it to yourself. Share with your friends in your network. And if you have a moment, I would really appreciate a review of the podcast. That'll help other people find the show as well. Tune in every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. when I release another episode. Take care now. Have a good one, friends.